spiritual care means accountability, and the first thing you said, which is really, really important, and the first thing you said is it involves care for the whole person, not spiritual, emotional, intellectual, physical. There's so many different persons within this person, and we all need those different facets of care. Beautiful. What else?
I was just listening to the word again, I was thinking that it really means to show care, and because sometimes we get so caught up in our own spiritual lives that we forget to, broaden the view. So really care to everyone around us, as opposed to just on my spiritual care is the care of everyone else. So it's the broadening, like Queen Kunti says, like not a narrowing, a broadening. So it's my spiritual care so that I can encompass all others.
So by caring for myself, I become equipped to care for others. That's very beautiful. Thank you so much. What else? Anybody else have a thought?
I was thinking the phrase like radical personalism, where you're like there for someone through the thick and thin of their spiritual inspirations and their spiritual struggles.
Beautiful. That's beautiful. Radical personalism, being there for someone through the thick and thin. So, usually we hear, well, stay in your own lane, right? But radical personalism is more about sort of stepping out of my lane to care. Like Narada Muni stepped out into the forest to reach out to Magrari the hunter. He stepped out of his lane. So that's, I think, and we'll talk about that a bit more. Thank you. Yes?
I think being an instrument of Krishna's love, like what Jamuna Jaya said was super beautiful, how we have to care for ourselves, and how Mahatma Prabhu defined that in his self-care workshop. He said that sadhana and Krishna consciousness is self-care. That's the real self-care, and when we connect to Krishna, then we can be an instrument to give Krishna's love to others. And I think, like everyone's saying, that has to be done in a way that every aspect of that person, that whole person, feels love on all levels of their being. And just being that, just kind of being like that space holder, like, and listener. Like, this person is on their journey with Krishna, and I'm not making this person Krishna conscious. That Krishna loves this person, and let me just be a space holder to connect them to Guru and Krishna, and to just hold them unconditionally and listen to them in whatever way they need, to give them the space to come to their own in spiritual way.
Be a space holder, give them space to come to their own really relationship with Guru and Krishna. I always kind of laugh when I hear a devotee say, "Oh, I made such and such person."
Totally didn't.
That person may have been on the path many decades or lifetimes before you. So, thank you. Such wisdom from all of you. Yeah.
Helping people to feel seen, heard, and understood, and creating, as Champak was saying, creating a space that's non-judgmental, where someone can actually reveal their heart. Not only that they're presenting themselves in such a way that they feel will be acceptable, that they can feel fully seen, and in that way, accepted on a very genuine level for every part of who they are.
Beautiful. So create a space where people can be authentically seen and heard without judgment. Yeah, I read something, I think I was going to mention it later, that those places where people feel authentically or deeply seen and heard, those are sacred places. So just imagine, beautiful. Anything else before we jump on? This baby is very aware. Right now, she's completely enchanted with Jamuna Jaya. She doesn't know anything else to say. So talk about radical personality.
She is, look at those eyes.
Beautiful. So thank you all so much. Yeah. So So I think spiritual care, it's more than a popular trend in Krishna consciousness or ISKCON. It's more than a buzzword. It's really, it's an art and it's a science. Sometimes Prabhupada talks about Krishna consciousness as a science. I think in many ways it's a science. You know, like Rabindra Swarup used to say, well, people say, well, I tried Krishna consciousness, it didn't work. Well, did you wash the test tube before you made the experiment? No, I didn't do that, so I didn't experiment. But so, in one sense, it's a science, it's also an art of loving, art of living. And I wanted to begin by saying that I'm not an expert in this topic at all, but I thought I could share some experiences that I did some training in grief support with Karuna Care, which is a wonderful something to check out if you're serious about spiritual care. I really think, check out karunacare.org. They have wonderful courses that I want to highly recommend in training for care for abuse, addiction, grief support, so many things. So that's one of the first things I really want to emphasize, that they're experts actually in these fields in ISKCON. And so if you're taking it seriously and it's not just a buzzword or a popular trend that is going to fly out of your mind today or tomorrow, then consider getting training. And even more than that, Rambaru is training chaplains, which is a wonderful, it's a wonderful occupation for a devotee, because it's really all the things that we do, but it's a profession also. You could actually support your family, get paid for it, and giving that kind of care. So, and also, I had the chance to take a couple of courses from Braj Bihari with ISKCON Resolve, conflict resolution, mediation, ombudsmanship. And so these courses train people in how to investigate complaints and attempt to solve them in corporate environments or different environments, So lots of experts there for you to serve you and help us all become more expert. So one thing I learned in the conflict resolution courses from Braj Bihari is that he says that the greatest cause of conflict across the board is making assumptions. When we make assumptions, and I know where she's at, or I know what he's thinking, or I know just what to tell you. It comes on so many levels. And sometimes those making assumptions even lead to war, world wars. This is history that we can look at. And so I just really wanted to make that point, that become trained, become certified, go into these courses and take it really seriously, and it just may be an occupation for you. We have Dina Bandhu, there's Ganesham, Florida, Kula Pradeep, Venkatabhata's a university chaplain. Now Kula Pradeep's a chaplain at Stanford University. There are military chaplains, there are all kinds of interesting opportunities to consider. So I wanted to speak a little bit, first of all, about my experience in grief support. So these grief support groups that we were trained to lead, I did grief support with a colleague, Giri Govardhan, who's a very dear friend, a mentor of Champak Lata. So we led two 12-week grief support sessions. And and it was working with there's a man named Dr. Alan Wolfelt. And he's written many books, thanks. He's counseled and worked with thousands of people experiencing grief. And his thesis is very interesting. He talks about companioning people through the wilderness of their grief. So it's not about walking in front and, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to preach to you. It's not about walking behind and like sympathy, oh, bless your heart, you poor thing. But it's about walking beside people as a companion and helping them come to their own conclusions, which is really, really, we experienced it as really quite mystical, because people were, in amazing ways, coming to their own conclusions. So I want to ask you, what's the difference between sympathy and empathy. Anybody have a thought on that? Yes.
I feel in sympathy there is a certain amount of attachment.
Attachment and sympathy.
Where the empathy allows that person to see the person in their pain, but not be so attached to their pain.
Not to be so attached to their pain, but to see them, but not to be so attached. What else? Difference between sympathy and empathy? Yeah.
Sympathy is having compassion for someone. Empathy is knowing what they're going through.
Beautiful. Knowing what they're, so empathy is knowing what they're going through, really feeling it, knowing what they're going through. Anything else? Yes.
I actually always misunderstand the word, because that's what I thought empathy was. Like, I've been through something similar, I can empathize. But can you also just empathize with somebody by trying to put yourself in their shoes, or is that, I don't know
No, I
actually.
think that's very much a part of it. Yeah. Trying to put yourself in their shoes, see what it would feel like, you know. First, you just reminded me of a joke somebody said, you know, before you judge somebody else, walk 100 miles in their moccasins. But then this comedian said something about, and then if you can't understand them, you still have their moccasins. That's one for you. So here's what I had understood. Sympathy is a feeling of pity or sorrow, which could be seen as a type of looking down on someone. Empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another person. So a verse comes up for me that's a famous verse for all of us. Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th Canto, 14th chapter, 8th verse. Tattein kampam sasavikshamana. The sort of quintessential verse about compassion, self-compassion, or compassion for others. So in this verse, this word anukampam, actually, it's translated as compassion or mercy, but and strangled her, and she died. And so it was a very, very tragic situation, something that happened right on the property of the community. And the parents, of course, were so deeply grieving, and devotees were coming to them and trying to help, and, you know, as best they knew how, right? So, but I think this is a great lesson for all of us. Afterwards, the father said that he felt the devotees were coming to him to really satisfy their own need to preach. You know, saying what they wanted to do to make themselves feel better. And he felt like they weren't really there for him. You know, so this is, I think, an important story for all of us to remember. So oftentimes in situations of grief or tragedy, sometimes the most well-meaning devotees or family members or friends, maybe you've all heard this before, or people in general who are trying to help, right? They just don't know what to say. They don't know what to do. And they're trying to help, and even the most loving family members or friends or devotees, or, you know, they can say the most hurtful things. Sometimes, I know one woman in Washington, she lost her husband, and she really had to take a hiatus from the whole ISKCON community. And, you know, we could say, well, maybe that was in her own interpretation, in her own mind. But so she had to take a hiatus from the community because she felt that everything people would say to her was just so hurtful, even though people were trying to be helpful. You know, people said things like, oh, you know, you'll get over it, or, you know, you'll have another baby, or, you know, so many things that can just be like a knife in the heart of someone. So that's why I really want to emphasize first and foremost that counseling and how to be a counselor is really, really necessary. Here's another important example. So maybe you've all, or many of you have heard of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. So she wrote a seminal book called On Death and Dying. She worked with dying people, a brilliant book, and she analyzed that there are different stages, 5 different stages of dying. So, but people have misapplied her work with dying people and applied that to grief. Even people who've written books talk about, okay, here are the 5 stages of grief. But grief doesn't work like that. Grief can go any which way. You know, you may feel, well, here's the 5 stages. Let me just tell you what she said, so the 5 stages of dying are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and finally acceptance. So the point is that in grieving, there's no order. Somebody may be, analyzing their own grief journey and thinking, oh, I'm so depressed, but I should be beyond that by now because it's already been a year or whatever, So people, things can crop up in any which way. And then go back to some other stage that you feel like, oh gosh, I thought I was over this depression, but now I'm depressed all over again. So, it doesn't work like that, and that kind of judgment or analysis can be counterproductive. So that's why I'm going back to this point, how important it is to really be trained by experts, and those experts are available for us in the devotee community. Passing judgments when someone's grieving, why am I or why is she or he still depressed or angry or whatever, it's already been so long, am I abnormal, am I going crazy? And so what we found in grief support, or in this training we did, was that it's about employing deep listening. And as I said a little while ago, it's almost mystical how people can arrive at their own conclusions and their own sense of peace just with the assistance or the subtle hearing and guidance of someone who's trained in deep listening, gently companioning. And this, grief is like a wilderness. So this idea of just walking beside someone in the wilderness of their grief has so many components: deep hearing, journaling, hearing about the lost person. Sometimes people think that they shouldn't even talk about that person anymore. My husband has this Christmas memory of, well, Aunt Audrey's not here this year. And she was here every year before that, so nobody's talking. She's just erased. So it's our culture is, I think, very sick about those things. So time is a healer, and time is Krishna, but time is only a healer when the right methods are employed. Time doesn't necessarily heal when people are not employing the right methods to their healing. Sometimes people will say, oh, just stay busy, or the grieving person will say, have you heard that before? I'm just trying to stay busy. But that doesn't work. It doesn't work. So deep listening, what is deep listening? Deep listening means to lean in, to listen intently without a prejudgment or without having your own agenda in your listening, to be willing to be changed by what you hear. That's a really beautiful piece. I may come in as that I am the expert, I am trained, but to be willing to be changed by what you hear. You don't have to agree with what they're saying, and you don't have to do what they say you do. But sometimes when we listen generously to people, they can hear the truth in themselves sometimes for the very first time. And they'll believe it when it comes out of their own mouth and bubbles up from their own, really super soul, right? So that's Krishna as the internal listener, speaker, hearer, guide, inner guide, right? And here's this beautiful quote. It said that to give our attention is the rarest and purest form of generosity. So reflective listening, right? Listening and reflecting back to the person speaking to get it more clearly. So there are 4 different powerful transformations that can come about from deep hearing and reflective listening. And I have a little acronym that I made up that works for me. You might like to write this down. It's CHOT, C-H-O-T, CHOT. And so the C, what does the C stand for? Number 1, the C means that deep listening can often just clarify. Deep reflective listening can clarify misunderstandings like this. If I'm understanding you correctly, you're feeling angry about, and the person might say, no, I'm not angry, I'm disappointed. So you see how reflecting, and then it helps that person clarify what they're actually feeling. So number 2, the H, stands for that the person sometimes just needs to be heard. They haven't had that opportunity to just be heard. So again, that sacred space, when someone can just be heard without judgment. So that's the H. Number 3 is the O. Deep reflective listening can often help someone come to their own conclusions, right? It's not about you dictating, me dictating, helping them come to their own conclusions. And number 4, that the T is deep reflective listening, just helps to build trust. So that trust is such a key cornerstone of spiritual care, relationship. Another kind of buzzword we hear in devotee communities, love and trust. Okay, love and trust. Yeah. So this creates trust, just deep hearing, deep listening, without judgment, without being prescriptive. So that's my little short acronym. Here's a nice something. That grateful living is the awareness that we stand on sacred ground always. If we're awake, if we're conscious, we have a chance to be in touch with the mystery of Krishna, really the mystery of Krishna consciousness. Srila Prabhupada wrote something beautiful. He said, everything is moving, acting under the supreme desire of Krishna. This consciousness is Krishna consciousness. I think often as devotees, we love to preach, we love to advise, I'm going to give her a piece of my mind. No, that's not, or my intellect, right? I'm so intellectual. I know the scriptures, I know Bhagavad Gita, I know Srimad. I'm going to give him a piece of my intellect, my mind. No, it's not about that. Or even for a grieving person, when we go and I think back about that story told about that father, right? So when we go and tell someone, someone's lost a child, or lost a husband, or lost a wife, or even lost a pet, or sometimes even lost a limb. Someone has lost a limb. You probably see that in your work, and they're grieving. And so we go and we say, well, you're not this body. And why are you lamenting for what is not worthy of grief? And that's what we're just quoting Krishna and Bhagavad Gita, right? It's exactly what Krishna said. But the right medicine misapplied at the wrong time or in the wrong mood or mentality can actually be harmful. And the new sannyasi Keshav Maharaj from the UK, he said something very, very wise. He said, the truth spoken without compassion is no longer the truth. Isn't that powerful? The truth spoken without compassion is no longer the truth. So it's interesting, if you look at Krishna as a listener, as a teacher, in the whole chapter, first chapter of Bhagavad Gita, he only speaks once in the whole chapter. In verse 25, where he just pointing out to Arjuna, just behold the Partha, all the Kurus who are assembled here. That's the only thing he says in the whole chapter. And the rest is Arjuna just, ruminating, pontificating, thinking, what should he do? And Krishna's been deeply listening to Arjuna's lament through that whole chapter. And it's only in the second chapter when Arjuna submits himself to Krishna. Shishasteham sadimam tam prapanam. And Krishna, he says, now I am your disciple. No more friendly talks, no more casual talks back and forth, I'm your disciple, please tell me what I need to know, And that's when Krishna begins his instructions. So it's interesting also if we look at Srimad Bhagavatam. Did you ever think about this? In Srimad Bhagavatam, usually the speaker doesn't begin to advise unless and until somebody asks a question. And then the speaker may begin to speak some wisdom or give some advice. So you mentioned radical personalism. So I wanted to speak a little bit about Srila Prabhupada's radical personalism, his radical noticing, his radical presence. So I don't know if you've heard some of these stories before, but let me share. So there's a beautiful story that took place right here on the Lower East Side, Satsvarupa, at that time he was not initiated, his name was Stephen Guarino, and he was not initiated yet. This is in the early days, he was invited to the first initiation, which was on a Thursday night, but he was a very, by nature, very humble person, and he just didn't feel qualified, so he just skipped out on that. But he was doing this service for Prabhupada, he was typing up Prabhupada's, manuscripts or recordings or whatever it was. And every week Prabhupada would come to his door, knock on the door, and collect the typed work that he had completed over the week. So after skipping out on the initiation the night before, Prabhupada showed up, who was called Swamiji at that time. Prabhupada shows up at his door, and Stephen, future Satsvarupa Das Goswami, he hands Prabhupada his completed typing work. And maybe he was thinking it's just going to be a mechanical exchange. It's going to complete the work, check the boxes, or whatever he was thinking. But Prabhupada took the manuscript from him and just looked at him. To me, this is radical personalism. In this mood of radical personalism, he looks at him in the eye and says, "If you love me, I'll love you." Isn't that such a luscious story? And that was completely heart-melting for him. It's not mechanical. It's about giving the heart. So that was completely transformative story. So what about, service means to give the heart. It's not about checking the boxes or doing things in a mechanical way. Here's another story, and to me this is Prabhupada's radical noticing. So Srila Prabhupada was in Dallas at the time when they had a Gurukula there, and he was lecturing on Srimad Bhagavatam in the temple room, sitting on his Vyasa-san. And there was one teacher, she felt very stressed. She was an academic teacher, but she was also in charge of the little girls, a little group of little girls at night. So she was what was called an ashram teacher and an academic teacher. And she said she just felt like she was just braiding hundreds of little braids every day. She was just really quite burnt out. And so what happened was, while Prabhupada was lecturing, one of the little girls under her care started to cry during Prabhupada's lecture. So she was so embarrassed, she didn't know what to do, right? So she takes the little girl and takes her out of the temple room and walks down the hall and puts her in one of the classrooms and puts her in the corner on a little blanket and said, "Just stay here and don't come out," And then she just went right back into the temple room like a very good devotee to hear Prabhupada's Srimad Bhagavatam class, So what did Prabhupada do? So Prabhupada completed his talk, and after he spoke, he got down from his Vyasa-san, he walked out of the temple room, he walked right down the hall into the very room where this teacher, so-called teacher, right, had put this little girl in the corner, and the little girl had fallen asleep. And somehow she felt Prabhupada's presence when Prabhupada walked in, and she said, "Oh, Prabhupada," and Prabhupada went up to her, and he was just like stroking her hair and talking to her, and making her feel all right. So who knows what that little girl must have been going through? Maybe she was missing her mommy. Who knows how old she was? Maybe she was hungry, maybe she was tired, maybe. But I think on that day, that teacher got a real lesson on what it means to teach and what it means to love. So, to try to see the world with these eyes of pure devotion, like Srila Prabhupada, or someone on the caliber of Srila Prabhupada might see the world. So, trying to invoke or remember the wonder of Krishna's presence, right? Trying to see the world as Krishna's, as sacred each day, again and again. That's radical noticing. To radically notice, to look for awe, to look for a sense of connection or wonder in all of life. Radical noticing. Here's another one. To me, this is Srila Prabhupada's radical presence. And I'm going to ask you all what this brings up for you. So this was a Vyasa Puja day, which means Prabhupada's birthday celebration. And so devotees are coming up one by one and speaking their offerings to Prabhupada. Sometimes very verbose, or, oh Prabhupada, you're the Jagat Guru, you saved me, or, speaking so many different things. And there was a devotee, I don't mean to make fun of it, because very sincere, but each one, so there was a devotee who was sitting right at the base of Srila Prabhupada's Vyasasana. And after each devotee spoke, this devotee was hearing Srila Prabhupada under his breath, whatever they would say directed at him, he was saying to them, now you become. Whatever you're saying to me, you become that. You become, now you become. So I'm saying this is Prabhupada's radical presence, radical encouragement. And what strikes you about this story? What does it bring up for you? Yes?
I've talked with dear Hard Priya Radha from Radhika village about how we strongly feel Radha Swami, he always encourages his disciples and everyone actually. And we both shared our hearts with each other that anytime Radha Swami gives like a compliment or says something nice about us, it's actually him instructing us to be that way. Because just like Prabhupada would see the spark in someone and he would fan it, so he would see their full potential. He would see what they can be, and he would encourage that person to be that. And I feel like Radha Swami does the same by when we encourage and appreciate others, they actually, maybe they didn't see that in themselves before, maybe they didn't think they could do that, but when they hear that, they feel like, oh, like, I can actually be like that.
Beautiful. Is the recording picking that up, or should I repeat it?
It's picked up.
It's picked up. Beautiful. So, radical encouragement. Radical, now you become. Whatever you're saying to me, you become. What else? What does this bring up for you?
Also that there's a sense of generosity. There's not like a power hungriness to it, that there's not enough, and so I need to ensure that I have this position. It's like, no, everyone should rise, everyone should continue on their to make spiritual progress that's beneficial to us all, so the ego is no longer a part of it.
Beautiful. Take the ego out of the game. Right? That's so important, so beautiful. So yeah, what else? Yes, yes? Oh, Kumar, did you have something? Anybody else? Radical, yes.
What came to my mind is that the real spiritual seeker, he wishes that everybody else makes more advances than he.
Yes, that everyone should make more advancement than I have.
Yeah.
It's not just that you're praising me and I'm going to just, bask in the praises you were saying. Beautiful, yes.
I think that's also his compassion for the world. Like, you become so that we can span out and give as many people Krishna as possible.
Yeah, beautiful. Very beautiful. So, yes.
You probably know this quote better than I do, a little vague on it, but Jesus prays to Krishna, and there's something like, as you and I are one, make them one with us.
Wow.
Right? This idea that,
She's
to me, it sounds like it's not just me, we can all reach this state of consciousness.
Beautiful. Thank you.
I was thinking it sounds to me like both an instruction and like an empowerment.
Yes.
That Prabhupada's with the instructions giving the empowerment that I want you to become like this, and yet it's that simultaneous the Guru wants to empower you, but you have to be willing to be empowered. That yeah.
Take it out.
Yeah, he's saying you have to do something. I'm not just gonna, magically make you empowered.
But I'm
So it's
blessing you.
Yeah, so it's
And now
like
you
this
take it up.
teamwork.
Yeah, that's nice. That's like the two fingers, right, of the Damodar. Our endeavor and Krishna's grace. Yes.
I'm just going to add to what she said, and I guess a little bit of it's just an addition, but from the standpoint that, when I when I hear that statement, I think like, hey, you know what, this process works. If you follow it, you can become just as, you know, spiritually connected as I am. You can become this if you follow the process. So it's like almost like, it's an encouragement, but also saying that, hey, you know what, this is real, this works.
Exactly.
You can do it too, yeah.
And it's not just about empty flattery or praise, but it's about you becoming empowered to do this now.
Exactly.
Take it out.
Exactly.
Yeah, go ahead.
So Prabhupada was the ultimate, you know, he could see things in people, and one of the ways to really understand what people want is they reflect. And so how I understand it is Prabhupada, if I praise Prabhupada in a certain way, or if I praise you in a certain way, it may be my aspiration to be the same. And so Prabhupada acknowledged that to say, you too can be that, and you will, you're on your way type of thing. So you had mentioned earlier about spiritual care and what that means. It's meeting people where they're at and moving them up that ladder rung. And so a lot of times that comes with the attentive listening that you're talking about. And that's an example, at least for me, to what that attentive listening looks like.
So powerful, so transformative.
And Prabhupada told everyone you become guru. And then I think that the GBC actually made this resolution that we study before initiation, because there was some question of, you know, does someone have to be a pure devotee to be a guru? And they came to this statement that pure devotee means following the pure. So if you're sincerely trying to follow the pure, you're empowered. Because Prabhupada wanted everyone to do that, and it's all about taking our ego out of it. It has nothing to do with us. We're not qualified, but that empowerment and that mercy comes. And one time I asked Radhanath Swami, because I genuinely, like I told him, you know, there's people who are coming to me and like asking me to be their mentor, but I'm not qualified. Like, what do I do? And his response was, the postal peon is not qualified. The postal peon just delivers the message. He said, you just deliver the message as it is. And he said, and you should do the service. It doesn't matter if you're qualified or not, just deliver the message. And then he said, but also don't pretend you're a senior devotee. If you don't know how to respond to something, go to a senior devotee and ask their advice. But that you should do the service. And I found that so powerful. Like everyone, it's not about us. We're not the teacher. Prabhupada is the teacher. We're just repeating Prabhupada.
Repeating the realization. What does the button say that you wanted about becoming an instrument?
Don't be resistant, be his instrument.
Don't be resistant. Be his instrument. Nice. So appreciate more and expect less and live frugally on surprise. Like being surprised is about a sense of wonder. And the greatest surprise is being loved. And here, Srila Prabhupada showed so much love, so we can also extend that kind of love. That's the greatest surprise, the surprise of being loved. And we can only be conduits like that if we give up pride, if we give up the ego, which is just such a wedge that's blocking that love. So Krishna's love gets reflected and magnified through the love of his devotees. So I think we can really strive for that, and we will all thrive on that kind of love. There's something beautiful from Socrates. He said, a sense of wonder is the beginning of knowledge. And also, if you look at our Bhakti tradition, that sense of wonder is actually the foundation of all the rasas of Krishna. If you look at the stories in the chapters of Krishna, the residents of Vrindavan are always just in this sense of wonder, wonderful Krishna. They're just always like amazed at wonderful Krishna. And so Nanda Maharaj, wow, something wonderful happened. So I think I'll give like 100,000 cows today because of wonderful Krishna. So that kind of, think about that. It's actually the foundation or the basis of the other rasas. Even in our own lives, right, to just appreciate wonderful Krishna, the wonder of his gifts, the holy name, his wonderful form, his qualities, his pastimes, his sweetness, his devotees. the wonders of his creation, and just the wonder that I've been given another day today, right? So many parts of the world, we were just talking right before, parts of the world people don't know. They're gonna have another day like tomorrow, right? So thank you, Krishna. Thank you, wonderful Krishna. There's something beautiful that I heard from I think he's kind of like a Sufi saint, Kabir. He's sort of like in between Bhakti and Sufism. But he said he prayed to look upon each moment with the same eyes of wonder as when he first set eyes on his newborn son. Isn't that beautiful? Yeah. So it said that grateful eyes look at each thing, each moment, as though they'd never seen it before, and caress it as if they would never see it again. So, yeah, so I want to check in with you about time, because I know we started a bit late, so yeah. Go on or a little bit or not, we'll stop here. Or?
We can go on for another few minutes.
Okay, like
comfortable, and
10-ish?
then we'll take a short break. We'll break for about 5 minutes, and then we'll enter into the interview section.
Okay, so maybe 5 or 10, what do you think?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So I wanted to speak a little bit also about self-compassion, because you mentioned, I think you mentioned at the beginning that empathy starts with ourselves, self-compassion. I wanted to speak a bit about that. So I had something that happened to me a couple of weeks ago at this point, and it's really embarrassing to talk about, but due to an inattentive and really foolish, I would say quite stupid mistake on my part, my computer was hacked. And Anuttama Prabhu was in India at the time, he's my husband. He was in India, and we ended up having to change our bank account number, all our credit cards, everything, PayPal, Venmo, everything had to be changed, canceled. It was a big time waster, and some money was lost. It was a time waster, an energy waster, a money waster. And, you know, I was feeling like it was so foolish and, you know, so stupid really, and I just really wanted to beat myself up a lot over it. But self-compassion is really, really important. And yeah, sometimes when we make foolish mistakes or we regret causing pain to ourselves or causing pain to someone else, or we find ourselves in some kind of embarrassing situation or maybe misunderstood. So here's some prescriptions for self-compassion. So sometimes we speak to ourselves more harshly than we would ever imagine speaking to anyone that we care about. You know, like, you know, beating yourself up in a way that you would never speak to any friend of yours or anyone you care about, you know, you stupid fool, how could you do such a thing? This is blah, 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 and go on, you know. So here's 3 components of self-compassion, I would say. First, recognize that this is a moment of suffering, right? This is, and to be able to show a little kindness to yourself, speak a few words of kindness to yourself, maybe even give yourself a little hug, the same way you extend that kind of kindness to someone else that you care about, you know. Here's the second component of self-compassion. Understand that the suffering that you're experiencing right now is, it's suffering. Did you ever get hacked? Were you laughing because you got it?
No. Inside joke.
It's an inside joke.
He has a tendency to
What's that?
we have a joke about that.
Okay, well, it's good you can joke about it. It's always good to have someone to joke about when you make your foolish mistakes or not foolish mistakes. But here's the second component that I would say is understand, like really reflect that suffering is a shared human experience, that I'm suffering in this moment, and that just as I've done something foolish or really quite stupid, but you know, I'm suffering for this now, but this is a shared human experience. There's suffering. All people suffer, and all people have good qualities as well. And we all fall short from time to time. And so just that understanding, that interdependence. Haribo, good to see you. I was just looking around, where is Dial coming? Thank you for coming.
I was teaching a class this
Oh,
morning,
cool.
so I wasn't able to give it till now, so that's why I'm late. I
Oh, good.
apologize.
Teaching here, it's very circular.
A Bhakti Shastra for the Bhakti Center.
Oh, nice, wonderful. So yeah, you know that we all fall short from time to time, and those inherent good qualities are there in everyone. Those inherent tendencies to suffer or to make mistakes are there in everyone. And you know, it brings up for me that we're all interdependent. We're all tiny beloved parts of Krishna's energy. Bhagavad Gita 4:35, where Krishna says, if someone has seen the truth, okay, what's the symptom of someone who's seen the truth? They know that all living beings are in me and they're mine. Krishna says they're part of me, they're mine. So when we cause any kind of violence to another living being, that means we're not acting in that realization that every living being is part of Krishna and belongs to him, you know. So, yeah, and then the third part, just a little compassion, self-compassion, a little self-compassion prayer. May I be kind to myself in this moment and give myself the compassion that I need right now. So then, I wonder if I should, okay, let me go on to this. Did you ever think that I wish I could see myself the way other people see me? You know, my mistakes, my foolishness, maybe my good qualities as well. You know, maybe I beat myself up so much, maybe I don't see the good qualities that someone else sees in me, or, you know, so sometimes we can just ask a dear, trusted, intimate friend, someone with a caring heart, someone with a caring set of eyes, what am I doing wrong here? Or maybe what am I doing right here? And you know, sometimes that deep, intimate, trusted, caring friend is right within us. We're carrying him within us, that Krishna trusted friend. So it takes humility though, right? To want to see what am I doing wrong? And to be able to trust what we hear. What am I doing right? What am I doing wrong? Sometimes our critics can be our greatest friends, show us what we're not able to see ourselves if we have the humility to hear it, to reflect on it, to want to know what are the obstacles on my path, you know. Sometimes we're just so obtuse, right? We don't want to know, we don't want to see, don't tell me, don't show me, right? And then, you know, as I mentioned earlier, this tendency to make assumptions, right? That, you know, someone may have made an assumption about me or something I said or did, and may be totally wrong, misunderstanding my motives of what I said or did. And those assumptions can be the greatest cause of misunderstanding, according to experts in this field of conflict resolution. So I wanted to bring up this interesting story. I hope you like this as much as I do. So there was a poet in the 17th century, Robert Burns, and he wrote this poem. First I'm going to give you the backstory of this poem. So he's sitting in church, and there's a lady sitting in front of him in the church, and he noticed she's wearing, you know, she must have been a very pious, proper lady, maybe quite wealthy. She had quite a fancy bonnet on, sitting right in front of him, and a pew in front of him. And so he's noticing that there's a louse, which is singular of lice. He's noticing that there's this insect, a louse, crawling around on the back of her bonnet as he's sitting behind her in church, you know. So because he's a poet and have you ever heard this before? Anyway, he's a poet and he's introspective, so it brings up a lot of thoughts for him, you know. So, you know, here's this insect. She has no idea. She's feeling very proper, you know. Maybe she has a fancy dress, she has a fancy bonnet. Maybe she's a very pious lady. But so anyway, he starts chastising the louse for not realizing how important his host is. And then he's reflecting that to a louse, maybe all humans are equal prey, and that maybe humans should give up their pretensions and just be able to see themselves through other people's eyes. Because he's having all these reflections. Then he's musing to himself how horrified and humbled this pious, proper lady would be if she had any idea that she's harboring this common parasite in her bonnet. So here's his poem, where he says, it's in Old English, so maybe I'll say it a couple of times, but he says, "Oh, would some power the gift he gives, to see ourselves as others see us, it would free many a blunder. It would from many a blunder free us, and foolish notion. What airs in dress and gait would leave us. And then he says, and even devotion. So I think what he's saying in that last word is kind of posturing of devotion, you know, or professed devotion. You know, all these airs of it. Should I read it again? It's a little archaic, so let me read it again. Oh, would some power the gift he give us, to see ourselves as others see us, it would from many a blunder free us, and foolish notion. What airs in dress and gait would leave us, and even devotion. So again, I think he's talking about like airs of devotion. So, yeah, maybe I should stop here. Would that be good? Okay. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much for being here. So, everyone, I'm sure so many questions and thoughts came up during this beautiful talk. So please hold tight to those, because we will have space after the interview component. We will have space for Q&A. So right now we'll just take a very short break. Anyone needs to use the bathroom, anything like that, but we're going to try to keep the time, you know, expedient here. And we're looking forward to Yadanath Prabhu will be joining Rukmini Prabhu for a discussion in interview format. And the name of that talk is Looking Forward to the Future of Community Care, Areas of Exploration, Introspection, and Deeper Contemplation.
That's the title of it? I need a 5-minute break.
So much for us to look forward to in the immediate sense and in the future of community care.
So it's
Yes.
11:29 right now. Should we put a time on the break when
Yes, yeah.
5 minute?
We're gonna do 5 minutes maximum.
So 11.